Hi everybody, this is Jessica again, and I am back with another video in my weight loss series here on Weird Weight Loss. So the subject that I want to talk about today is how often you should weigh yourself. Now when I say this, please understand that I'm answering this question for myself. I'm not necessarily answering this question for anybody but me, but if you are a person whose mind works the way mine does, then you may find this information to be very helpful. I will put out the normal disclaimer that I am not a medical professional and I have no qualifications to give anybody advice. So anything that you do is done completely at your own risk. So as I talked about in my previous video, with losing a large amount of weight and maintaining that weight reasonably successfully, a little hiccup, but I think I've done a lot better than many people have done. One of the subjects that has helped me is weighing myself. Now, the general advice on social media that we often hear is, don't weigh yourself. That will just depress you. You should only weigh once a week or once a month, or don't weigh at all. Just measure yourself and see how your clothes fit. This is something I see constantly on Facebook groups. Or the person who posts and says something along the lines of, I really know I shouldn't be weighing myself so often. I know it's bad, but I do. Guys, it is not bad to weigh yourself every day. That is not any sort of a generic or encompassing statement. It's not a one-size-fits-all situation. If I had to guess, I would say that it probably has a lot to do with your personal psychology and how your brain works and any issues that you might have as to whether or not that is effective for you or not. But I can tell you that not weighing myself was what got me fat in the first place. And if you don't like the word fat, I'm really sorry. But again, I'm not here to tiptoe around people's feelings. I was 5'3", I was 250 pounds, and I'm sorry, that's fat. If you're happy fat, I'm happy for you. If you have confidence fat, I'm also happy for you. But if you don't like being fat, then I hope that I can help you with that. If I had listened to that conventional idea of don't weigh yourself, I don't know that I would have lost the weight to begin with, and I'm very certain I wouldn't have maintained it. The rationale behind the traditional advice is that people who weigh themselves too often see small daily fluctuations, and these fluctuations discourage or depress them, or make them feel that they're gaining fat when in fact they're not gaining fat, or that they're not losing when in fact they are losing, because the numbers are reflecting things other than your actual true fat and weight. Now, it is true that the scale fluctuates, and it is true that many things affect the number on that scale. Water retention is the biggest thing. If you eat a lot of starchy, carby foods, or if you have a lot of salt, those things can make you have a lot of water. If you are, if you're having bathroom problems, and you're constipated, that can add a few pounds. If you have not flushed all of the fluid waste out of your system, if you haven't peed much, and then the next day you pee a whole lot, that was water that was sitting in your body, and it was adding to the scale numbers. How much you sweat can affect your weight on the scale. So those are all really important things. You can weigh more at one time of day versus another. You can weigh more if your scale is at a different part of the house and the floor is slightly uneven. So the most important thing about weighing is that regardless of how often you do it, always weigh at the same times. Especially if you're recording it, and always weigh in the same place. Also, always weigh naked, because obviously all your clothes weigh different amounts, and you'll never get a good reading that way. So if you're a person that does get easily discouraged, then I can understand the traditional advice of telling you to only weigh once a week. But here's why that didn't work for me, and here are what I consider to be the problems with that theory. The first is that if you're only weighing once a week, and that happens to be the day you're holding on to 5 pounds of water weight, you don't know. You don't know if you lost, if you didn't lose. You don't know if it's water. You just know the scale was 5 pounds higher, and that was a bad week. Whereas had you been weighing every day, then you would have known that that was just temporary and that you actually weighed significantly less the day before. In fact, the scale the day before might have even shown that you had some actual weight loss over the course of the week. And it should go without saying that if you're weighing once a month, then that's even more drastic of a situation. And I would personally never tell anyone to weigh once a month. I think that is far too long. I think you can gain a lot of weight in a month, especially if you're binging the whole time and you're eating 3,000 or 4,000 calories a day. And unfortunately, many people who have conquered obesity still do fight with binge eating, or they fight with having an unhealthy relationship with food. I would venture to say that probably most of us do to some extent. So what I do, both when I'm losing and when I am maintaining, is I weigh twice a day, every day. I weigh first thing in the morning, naked, after I have peed. And then I weigh the last thing at night, naked, after I've peed, before I go to bed. Furthermore, I sometimes weigh more than twice a day. If I have a large bowel movement, I weigh. If I know I'm going in there to have a bowel movement, I will weigh both before and after. If I know that I have been running to the bathroom and I have been peeing all day long, I will definitely weigh in the middle of the day to see if there's been any difference since the morning. Now, yes, the numbers do fluctuate when you do this. However, I don't find this discouraging. And the reason why it is probably not discouraging to me is because I have a very obsessive, almost compulsive sort of personality. And if I were not weighing, the anxiety about wondering what I weigh would be so bad that I would probably be eating emotionally to cope with it. And so that's not helping me. The other thing is that by weighing so often, I really, really understand what those numbers on the scale mean. I can think about, what did I eat yesterday that might have caused this? And I can figure it out. And I know what constitutes regular water retention and what actually constitutes gaining weight. Because I do catch it so quickly, I can fix that, that 1 or 2 pounds, I can fix it before it becomes 5 or 10 pounds. And it's much easier to lose a pound or 2 than 5 or 10. So I also learned this particular mechanism, this coping mechanism, if you will, from my mother, who has always been a very small and slender woman. However, it has not come easily to her. She's always had to be very careful about weighing herself and watching what she eats. She's not that person that can just eat whatever she wants and stay small. However, she is, she's 55, and I think she's about 117 pounds right now, which is probably about the biggest she's ever been, with like maybe one exception. I think she got up to 125 when she maybe first went through menopause. She weighed 112 pounds the day I was born, in fact. And I am the only child, so until menopause, that was as large as she had ever been. Pardon my sniffles, guys. I do want to say the allergies are really bad here. It's Texas, and there was all sorts of a dust storm kicking up. And so I'm sorry that you're having to hear me sniffle into the camera. So anyway, I feel that I have a very sort of neurotic personality in general, where I like to be very aware. I'm very type A. I like to have a lot of knowledge about everything about me. And so with my mentality, weighing once a week was not good. The problem with not weighing at all, or depending on measurements, or depending on the fit of your clothes, is that it can take a while before those things reflect anything noticeable. I think I wore the same pair of pants the whole first 6 months I was gaining weight because they were spandex and they just kept stretching. So I really don't recommend that. I feel like by the time your fit of your clothing has changed, you're a little too far. I'm not saying you can't recover, you can, but I still think it's too far to easily recover. I personally am not going to feel a difference in most of my clothes for 2 or 3 pounds. It's going to have to be 5 or 10. Measurements are not a bad thing. However, again, measurements can be very inconsistent. They can also change based on your water retention, or how you are measuring, or exactly where you are measuring. So I also don't feel that that's a very good method either. I feel like by knowing your body and knowing how it reacts and knowing how your scale reacts to the things that you do and the things that you eat or drink, that this gives you knowledge, and you are armed with that knowledge. And so you can know pretty reliably whether or not you're gaining weight, even if the scale moves. Now, one thing that I am a huge proponent of is very careful tracking of food and intake and calories. I did most of my weight loss primarily through maintaining a calorie budget. So if you are measuring your calories correctly, and that is also something that I may talk about a little more in depth, but you should be preferably weighing your food, and if not weighing it, then at least measuring it with cups and spoons. Measuring cups and spoons. The best thing that you can do, though, is to buy a digital kitchen scale and weigh your food very carefully, because the average person, they say, studies say, I don't know who they are, but the studies say that most people dramatically underestimate how much they eat if they're trying to eyeball it. I weighed and measured my food for the better part of 10 years, and to this day, I could not put exactly 4 ounces of chicken on a plate. It would be 4.5 ounces, it would be 3.5 ounces. Who knows? Well, that's only 20 calories, you say. Well, it doesn't matter, because 20 calories on every item you eat throughout the day adds up very quickly. And now it's 100 calories or it's 200 calories. And if you're already on a calorie budget that is very borderline as far as being a big enough deficit, that can be enough to take you from weight loss into maintenance. So that's why I do feel that it's very, very important. But the other reason that I feel it is important is because if you know exactly what you've put into your body, you know whether or not you can gain weight. You cannot eat at a caloric deficit and gain fat. It is impossible. And I know there are arguments against that. I know people will talk about starvation mode, and I would like to make a whole video about that. But it is physically impossible to gain weight at a caloric deficit. I'm sorry, let me rephrase that because that's not entirely true. You can gain water. You can gain water weight in a caloric deficit, but you cannot gain fat weight. So if you know that your calories have been at an acceptable level, you know what has been working for you in terms of weight loss, and you know that you're at a proper deficit and the scale moves up, you know it is water. Mathematically, there is no other possibility for it to be anything other than water. So there's no point for you to be depressed or to be upset about it. Just keep it in mind. And I wouldn't necessarily track that. I would track it mentally, but when I actually write my numbers down, I only really write them down maybe 3 times a week. Now, I will write them down an extra time if I notice a loss. Anytime I see a loss, I immediately log that so that I will know what day that loss showed up. But if you feel like you're a couple pounds heavy and it seems to be because of your menstrual cycle or something of that nature, which can cause a tremendous amount of water retention, then just don't write it down that day. You know that it's not fat, so it's not worth writing down. On the other hand, if you know that you binged for an entire weekend and you know that it's quite possible that you ate an extra 3,500 calories that you shouldn't have, you're still not gonna really weigh as much as that scale says. It takes about 3,500 calories to gain 1 pound. So even if you ate the extra, even 4,000 calories, the most you could gain out of that is about 1 pound. So if the scale shows you gained 5 or 6, then you know that is about the water from the salt that you had or the carbs and starches that you had. So I know I've let this video drag on a little long on a relatively simple topic, but my advice would be, when people tell you don't weigh yourself, I would ignore that. I would weigh every day. I would weigh twice a day. I would weigh as often as you want to. Now, some people may try to say that that is an unhealthy behavior or that it is a neurotic behavior. It is a little neurotic, but I wouldn't say that it's unhealthy, because it's really not unhealthy unless it is affecting your ability to do other things in your life. If you're late to work because you have to weigh yourself 5 or 6 times before you leave the house, then that's a problem. That's unhealthy. That's interfering with your ability to function as an adult and in society. If it's a case of an extra 10 seconds a couple times a day when you go to the bathroom, that's not hurting anyone, and it's not hurting you, and you're just giving yourself more information. It is a little obsessive, obviously, but straightening a picture in the hallway every time you walk by it is also obsessive, and no one makes an argument that that's unhealthy. This is not causing you any harm as long as you're not allowing yourself to be discouraged by those numbers that you see. Now, I'm going to reiterate my point from the beginning, which is that if you already know that something like that is going to upset you, then I would definitely ignore my advice to weigh every day. I would still weigh probably more than once a week, at least twice a week. So that at least you have 2 points of reference and you can compare them. That way, if one is a little high on the water weight, then you can maybe feel a little bit better about the other. Or if they're both high, then you know that maybe you need to go ahead and take some immediate action. By doing this, it kept me very accountable during my maintenance phase. I was able to see changes very quickly and respond very quickly, and it prevented me from being in denial about my weight, which is something which contributed to my original obesity, and also something that contributed to the small amount of regain I had, because I went through a stage where I stopped all my good habits, and that's when the weight came back, which is again a topic for another video as far as how to keep from regaining. I hope this piece of advice has helped you. Despite it being non-conventional, if it helps somebody out there, then I'll feel like this was a good thing to do. I wish you all very good luck on your journey, and I'll talk to you next time.